Okay, and once again, a warm welcome to you all, and thank you all for joining the CBI webinar on navigating Europe's AI market insights for SMEs, exporting AI software development services to Europe. My name is Mert van den Gaas, and I am a program manager at CBI, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, let me quickly run you through GoToWebinar, which is actually the tool that we are using to host this webinar. It is a rather very simple tool, and there's only a couple elements in your menu that are of relevance. Please kindly know that we cannot hear or see you. So you can wave at us, you can shout at us, but we simply won't be able to notice. However, you do have the option to post questions in the field under questions, and I really encourage you to do so throughout the whole session, as well as during the Q&A after the two main blocks of this presentation. And we will do our best to answer all the questions you may have, or afterwards in written form, answer them to you if we run out of time. Also in the background, there's a CBI colleague of mine available to answer some of your questions. And please know that this webinar is recorded, will be published on our website and YouTube channel afterwards, the same as the slides that we are using for this presentation. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we kindly ask if you can complete a short survey to share your feedback. So that's all for the practicalities, and I now would like to introduce to you our two main speakers. First of all, Laszlo Klux from Prodia Consulting, who has this incredible wealth of knowledge and long-standing experience within the sector, really supporting CBI and its IT outsourcing projects for many years. Laszlo, it's great to have you here. And second, we have Hans-Hendrik Groth, who's the CEO and founder of Crossworkers, an IT company headquartered in Denmark, but working with offshore development services centers in Egypt and South Africa, specializing in IT software development, business process outsourcing, and call center services. Thank you, Hans, and also for joining us, and both for showing our audience really a glimpse of how you look like. But before I give the hands to our presenters, let me just show you what we have in store for you by quickly running through today's agenda. So after a very short introduction from my side, we will hear from Laszlo, who will give an overview of the European AI market, focusing on talent shortages, the relevant legislative framework, trends in European buyers. And during this section, we will also hear from Hans, who will share insights on the Danish perspective. We will then explore how to best enter the European AI market, focusing on your export readiness, standards, best practices, market channels, and your ideal European clients. After summarizing all these main findings, we will, as always, conclude with a Q&A where our experts will answer your questions. While I do not want to steal too much of the time of our speakers, I do want to share with you a little bit about CBI, which is where this webinar is part of, by telling you who we are and what we do. So CBI is a Center for Sustainable Production and Trade. We are a Dutch government agency funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we are part of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO. And CBI partnered with SMEs and their ecosystem to strengthen their social and environmental sustainability. So what we do is we connect SMEs in low and middle income countries to the European market, and we focus on creating and promoting decent jobs, specifically for women, youth, as well as contributing to inclusive economic growth. So the SMEs are really our starting point. And what we do is we offer practical solutions to eliminate bottlenecks experienced in the value chain. And in many cases, this can be, for example, a lack of access to good quality market information. So we have a twofold approach. So first of all, we implement projects in our focus countries. And secondly, we provide market information on how to export your products and services to the European markets. CBI is active in 23 countries, mainly in Africa. And our work spans across different sectors, from agriculture, but also in a couple of service sectors, such as apparel, tourism, and IT business process outsourcing, where this webinar is part of. CBI, we implement a lot of projects in our focus countries, and we have on average around 40 projects running at any time, lasting from 4 to 6 years. And over the years, we have supported more than 10,000 SMEs from 70 countries, connecting them to the buyers or partners in the European markets. And many of our projects focus on export marketing, matchmaking, product development, branding, certification, corporate social responsibility, and so on. Maybe if you can go to the slide back, Laszlo. Yes. So here you can see just a quick overview of some of the projects that we are currently implementing in the IT outsourcing sector, which are projects in Ghana, Senegal, Morocco, and Egypt. And we will soon also start a project in Bangladesh. So next one, for the sake of time, I will only delve a little bit deeper into the market intelligence services that we offer. So CBI has over 30 years of experience in developing high quality market intelligence about the European market for local SMEs and business support organizations. This includes market studies, market access requirements, tips on how to find buyers, country, product fact sheets, and so on. And every year we publish over 300 market reports on our website. And it's very important to know that all these reports are free of charge and can be found on our website, cbi.eu. And maybe the next one. So the best one is, of course, to go to the website and also to subscribe to our newsletter to be informed of all the latest reports. So that's it from my side. And now I will hand over to Laszlo to really introduce this webinar and go more in depth on the topic of AI software development services.
Thank you very much, Mirte. So the first thing that I will try to talk about is to set some kind of a common understanding of what AI is and how the global market looks like. Just a few slides that at least we know what we are talking about. So the first thing, let's have a look at what others are saying about AI. The CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, said that that AI tools, software development tools, might eliminate about 50% of entry-level jobs in the next 1 to 5 years. At the same time, the World Economic Forum also said or made a survey that showed that about 41% of employers plan to downsize their workforce because of AI by 2030. The CEO of Meta, we all know about, expects, and I think this is staggering, he expects that AI is going to write about 50% of the company's code within the next year, and these are the facts, or let's say the ideas that these people are coming up with. And the CEO of Microsoft is saying that that about 30% of the code at Microsoft is already being written by AI. So as we can see, people are looking at AI as a very important enabler and a tool that will improve efficiency in the IT sector. Now, if we have a look at, I'm sure that you know about the Gartner every year publishes the emerging technology hype cycle, and if we look at this chart, what we are going to see is that we can find AI everywhere, and most of the AI tools and technologies are still quite far away from what I call the commodity plateau. Now, when a technology reaches the commodity plateau, and you can think about mobile application development or cloud-based development that are nowadays commodities, you will see that there are a lot of opportunities, but there are also a lot of buyers and a lot of service providers that are that are using the same kind of technology, and at that moment the technology will not be a differentiator anymore, and that is very important in the IT outsourcing sector. So if we look at this chart, we will see that that many of the listed technologies have something to do with AI, and many of the technologies are at an early stage of the hype cycle. So it will provide, and it is providing already, a lot of opportunities for small and medium-sized IT software developers from emerging markets. And just a few words about AI. I mean, we use the word AI very often, but we also need to know that AI itself is an umbrella term that includes a lot of technologies, from generative AI to robotics and automation, all kinds of language modeling and learning. So that was about let's say an introduction of AI, what it is, and how can we look at it. But at this very moment, I would like to make a poll, and you can answer a very simple question just to see where you are now. How are you using AI at the moment? So I think you will see on your screen the poll questions.
All right, I think Leslie is unable to see the poll, so let me just quickly recap the answers of the poll. So 30%, actually 29% of you are saying you are already actively using AI tools in your daily development. 32%, which is the majority, say we use AI occasionally for specific tasks. 29 says we are experimenting, but we have not fully integrated it yet. And 11% says we are not using AI yet. So it's a bit of a mix. I'll give the floor back to you again, Laszlo.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, for whatever reason, I was not able to see the poll result, but I was expecting a kind of mixed result at this very moment, and I think by the end of this webinar we will have a more clear picture of why this mixed result happened. So now let's continue with a few pieces of information about the European AI market and why Europe is a really attractive market for small and medium-sized IT software companies from emerging markets. Now, my assumption is that most of you are representing small and medium-sized IT, software development companies. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about why Europe, a little bit about the legal structures that exist in Europe, a little bit more about the European buyers and the trends that are shaping the AI industry in Europe. So why Europe is an attractive market? There are a number of forces that are moving the market right now, the AI market, and one of the most important issue in Europe is the talent shortage. Companies simply cannot find enough IT people, including experts for developing AI systems or integrating AI systems. I don't know if there are, people here watching this presentation from nearshore locations, but there is a favorable trend for nearshoring in Europe. That is not new. That has been going on for quite some time. And nearshoring for European buyers very often means Central and Eastern Europe, where they can find strong AI expertise. On the other end, in those countries, there is also a growing shortage of IT people. More and more industries in Europe are adopting AI, so there is a high demand for AI systems and AI-enabled systems across all kinds of industries. Innovation and learning hubs do exist in Europe, and also there are EU fundings and partnerships available, and very often these are also open for companies that are not coming from within the European Union. But one important aspect of AI at this very moment, still the technology or the set of technologies are at the earlier stages of the hype cycle, that at this very moment, if you are developing a disruptive or innovative technology, it's also possible to enter the market with those products. And again, if we think about, let's say, mobile application development or cloud development, it would be much harder to enter the European market with product development. I mean, your own product. So let me show you a few statistics about how the market looks like, and particularly it's very interesting how companies are using AI between 2021 and 24. As you can see that the growth is very clear, how companies are using AI, or companies at all using AI. And you can see that the growth is the largest in the small companies segment. It's also quite significant in the medium and the large companies. So all in all, from small to large companies, more and more companies are using AI in their daily practice. Again, this chart is not about IT companies, but companies in general. Now, another very important chart is about how easy or rather difficult it is to find IT specialists for companies in the European Union. As you can see that in 2024, the difficulty declined a little bit, but still an average almost 60% of the companies have difficulties to find IT specialists. So it means that if companies would like to implement some kind of IT projects, they need to look for other possibilities to have access to people, expertise, and technology. So this makes Europe a very interesting market for small and medium-sized IT companies from emerging market. Now, the EU has an ambitious plan to become a global AI leader. And for this, there are quite a number of programs going on in Europe. There are innovation hubs, and those are Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, and Stockholm. There is access to funding. The countries within the EU also support AI innovation in most of the countries. So it is wise to look at those countries one by one to see what kind of support is available. Education, AI education is also going strong at this very moment in Zurich, Munich, and Oxford. For instance, there is a very serious AI skills development. Also, the regulatory environment follows up in the European Union, and we are going to talk about later. So, all in all, in Europe, the environment is very supportive for AI development. Now, let's have a look at the legal and regulatory landscape in Europe. We need to talk about two things that are the most important at this very moment. The Artificial Intelligence Act and the Cyber Resilience Act of the European Union. The GDPR we all know about, but that has been in power for a longer period of time. And you can ask, why is that important for me? If I come to the European Union, my clients or the companies that I'm working with should know about it. Now, if you are aware of these legal frameworks and you act accordingly, then you are going to win more clients because you are going to show that you understand how important compliance is to your potential clients. You are going to avoid legal trouble because that's also possible if you are developing, for instance, non-compliant AI systems that you might get into all kinds of trouble. It's going to be a feature that you will make you stand out from the competition. And what is also very important in Europe is that the ethical and responsible use and development of AI. So all in all, if you know all about the let's say the applicable legal structures, that is going to help to convince your potential clients to work with you. Now, let me tell you a few things about the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is fairly new. There are 4 levels of risks associated with AI, and there are actions also aligned with all those risk levels. So the minimal risk means that there are no rules to apply, and there is no safety problems, or the fundamental rights, people rights will not be harmed. Now, there is limited risk where companies must clearly state that certain content is AI generated. The next level is high risk, where companies must comply with very strict rules, and the top level is unacceptable risk, where actually the activities, the AI activities and systems are banned, so cannot be used. So those are the 4 different levels, risk levels of AI set forth in the Artificial Intelligence Act. There are 2 quite important requirements. One is the AI literacy requirement, and that is that means that anybody who is involved in the development, deployment, or the use of AI systems are having proper understanding, knowledge, and skills about the possible risks and harms that the AI system might mean for that. So it's very important. The staff in companies that are also developing and deploying AI systems must be aware of all these. And of course, what I said, that there are banned on prohibited AI practices, social scoring, facial recognition, facial recognition, to put together facial recognition databases from different sources, but not targeted. And biometric categorization is also prohibited in the European Union. So this is quite important to know about in order to comply with European laws and regulations. Now, how do the European buyers look at your offers? Where are your buyers? Now, there is nothing new about it. Your buyers are in Western and Northern Europe, and that I mean your primary buyers are in Western and Northern Europe. But it's important to highlight that there are more and more partnership possibilities in Central and Eastern Europe, mainly because there is also a very serious staff shortage over there. So the buyers are, we know where they are. It is Western and Northern Europe. I would like to draw your attention that there is a new study, a new market research published by CBI, and in that research you can see detailed information about 6 countries in the European Union regarding AI, UK, the Nordic countries, Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Estonia. So please have a look at that. I am not going to get into details on these numbers. I just want to highlight that this detailed market research is available for download from CBI. Now, what are the expectations of your potential buyers in the EU? There are a number of things that these companies are looking for, from cost advantages, as it has been always very important in IT outsourcing, but also access to skills, people, expertise, domain expertise, and technology. So the expectation is that you are going to demonstrate quality and reliability with your company. It is more and more expected that you have some kind of security management system. Very well known is 27001 from ISO. Nowadays, one of the most important thing is that you have some kind of agile process in your company to develop software, and also from time to time a quality management system, very often ISO 9001 or CMMI is required. So there are quite a number of requirements that you might have to meet when you place your offer on the European Union. So now I would like to give the floor to Hans, who is going to talk about the Danish perspective. He is from Denmark, so he is going to talk about his experience and his company's experience regarding their experience regarding AI.
Thank you very much. Yes, and thank you for the intro. So on Danish, I've been working with IT for quite a number of years, and for the last 16 years or so, I've been working with Egypt also as a nearshore hub for Europe. So if we look at the tech side of things, because I've split it up in both tech sides and the more soft side on things. If you look at Scandinavia as a whole, it's probably one of the highest adoptions of AI in Europe. And that, of course, has a lot to do with the digitalization as a whole. It sometimes comes to as a surprise for some people that, for instance, a country like Germany is not the forerunner in IT, but they're really not. They're way behind some of the Scandinavian countries, for instance, and also some of the Baltic countries when it comes to IT digitalization, thereby also the AI. And therefore, there's a large difference in the maturity in Europe, in my opinion, where AI is still being adopted and so forth. A thumb rule for that is if you look at the salary levels, you will also have a drive for more and more AI. And that, of course, has to do with the ability to either do more with the same people or do the same with less people using AI. So therefore, there's an indication when it comes to the salaries versus the adoption of AI and digitalization as a whole. And then there's some cultural aspects of it as well, which might be a little bit far to go on this side. But there's some clear cultural reasons why the adoption of technology and digitalization is slower in some countries than others. Also, I think it's important to note that when you look at Europe as a market, there's both the public sector and the private sector. The public sector is huge. They have a different buying behavior in many ways than the private sector. There's definitely a great possibility for the public sector to adapt AI, and they are doing that in great numbers. They would have normally, that's my experience, they would have a normal preference for local vendors or European vendors, whereas when you look at private sector, they're more open to use nearshore, offshore possibilities for adapting new technology and integrating that into their organizations. As we started hearing about, there's AI is basically just an umbrella on a lot of things, and I think one thing which is really important to understand fully is that AI is not the thing. That's just one tool amongst many in digitalized solutions. And therefore, don't really sell, it's my opinion, don't sell AI as, well, that's the product, because that's just part of what you will be doing. As we also just heard, ethics and AI is somewhat different from what I've experienced around the world when it comes to Europe. Europe is quite a lot in the forefront when it comes to legislation about the use of AI, how to implement it, and so forth. And that has something which is in direct connection to the whole GDPR laws, which are now also slowly getting more and more implemented in the rest of the world, or some of the main markets. But you know, as I said, what is possible is not always doable. And by that I mean that you really have to think of the culture where you're working, where the systems are going to be used, because it has to fit with the culture of how to use information, and it's far more restricted than you would normally see in many both nearshore and offshore countries, but especially in the offshore countries. I think it's extremely important that when you work with European companies that you also are very much aware that you are not just performing what you're asked to do. You have to inject ideas, you have to contribute, and in some cases we saw it with some of the mobile solutions, banking solutions on mobiles, which were actually first in for instance, many of the African countries. And there might be areas where some countries it could be Africa, are kind of jumping over some steps and therefore are suddenly in front. And you have to be aware of those things, but you also have to add it into your solutions and your services. And then please do not underestimate the whole legislation side with the GDPR, importing, exporting data, the security part, and so forth. It basically means that a European customer has the responsibility on these matters, but they will basically ask you to sign on that, meaning that you should be in absolute and full control of where the development are taking place, meaning that if somebody is working from home, it's your responsibility to make sure that they are compliant with all these legislations in terms of security and protection and so forth. And therefore, it's not, and the easy part here is basically just signing an agreement. That is not the most important part of the whole framework of data protection and GDPR and AI and so forth. The most important is actually performing it in practice with your employees. And don't underestimate that, because that is where you can actually differ. Everybody can write a contract and sign it. Much fewer people can actually perform in reality. So that was part of the tech side. And then if we look at what I call the soft side of things, you have there when you're working nearshore, offshore, there are basically two C's, as I say, which is really important. It's communication and it's culture. And when it comes to culture, it's both the way we do business in Europe, which again differs from country to country, but it's also the tech culture. So using hacked licenses and so forth is absolutely out of bound. Using code which is not the IP of your own or the customers is absolutely on no-go and so forth. So you have to understand the culture, both the business culture and the tech culture. And I think one of the things which is the biggest challenge for many European companies is that when they're working offshore or nearshore, there is a wish to basically say, well, this can be done and so forth, but rather be honest, say, well, this can't be done now. It will take longer time, or we should do it in a different way or whatever. Rather be honest and truthful about things up front, then it's a whole lot easier to work on later. When it comes to communication, English is an absolute must unless you're speaking fluent German and are working with German. But it's also a matter of the style that you're communicating in. It has to align with European ways of communication. On the technical side, you could say everybody will be working on some sort of VPN connection on customer systems. If you're working in that way, if it's a product, of course, that would be different. But you have to have your security in place when you're doing this, and having good communication lines and so forth, so that you're able to do online meetings in a good quality and so forth. One thing which is more difficult is basically to have some boots on the ground in Europe, but it's a whole lot easier to do business with European companies if you are present in Europe in some sort of a way. If you're able to call from a European number and actually be in Europe, don't try to cheat on that. But try and have a company, try and have a partner, try and have a person which are on ground in Europe. And then of course there's the choice of how to what your delivery model should be. Are you delivering a product or projects? That's one thing. If you're delivering hands and brains, as I call it, that's a different thing. But be aware of those two. It's easier to kind of sell a project or product than it is to have a long-term relationship where you basically have a team working on a fixed contract with a European company. But it also has its difficulties working with projects. Yeah, and then finally, European law is, in my mind, a absolute must. No European companies will have a contract which is not on European law in some sort of a way. That's a big challenge for many, and especially if the companies gets a little bit bigger. And that, of course, also will give you extra challenges if you end up in some lawsuit in some sort of a way. But I think there's no way you can get out of doing things on European law. And then finally, you need to basically take care of yourself, protect yourself. There's a tendency that many of the companies that would seek offshore or nearshore, for that sake, support and services will also be the companies which are a little bit more shady than others, and therefore watch out so that you don't end up losing either delivering too much hours or services without getting the actual pay for it, and ending up in a situation where you lose on that side. So have yourself in mind. Not all European companies are playing with the same set of rules, and there is a tendency, as I said, that some of these companies looking towards offshoring might be a little bit more loose on the ethics and the moral than others. Yeah, I think that's it. So please change. And of course, if anybody has questions, whatever, you're welcome to ask them in the chat, and I'm sure that we'll catch up on those things.
Well, thank you, Hans. Soon we are going to have our first question and answer session of the presentation. But before that, I would like to tell a few things about the trends in AI that are shaping the market in Europe. There are new technologies, models, solutions, applications are popping up every day, as we all know. Interestingly, there are no-code AI tools available. So basically, without any programming and software development skills, it is possible to develop applications. Beside that, that is for let's say non-IT people, and for IT people, AI coding assistants appeared that are really more interesting for IT software development professionals. AI is becoming very strong for scientific discovery and robotics, especially physical world integration. What is also very important in Europe is sustainability and ethics in AI, and again, skill shortage, high wages, and increased competition is shaping the European market. Now, let me tell you a few things about opportunities. So you can ask, where are those opportunities we are talking about? So the next slide is about that. AI, as many other type of technologies before, is becoming a commodity very fast. So the window of opportunity is closing, and after that it's going to be even more difficult to enter the market. In order to solve this I would say problem, I think you have to develop expertise and to specialize on a niche market. But at this very moment, own product development is also possible. Now, I can list a lot of sectors here, and I did list a lot of sectors here, but again, I would like to highlight the importance of focusing. If you are a small or medium-sized software developer, I think it's very, very important that you focus on a small niche market, even within a larger market segment. So if we talk about healthcare, finance, and banking, very often I am asked by companies if it's viable for a small company or even a medium-sized company to enter to this market. Now, you need to know that these markets, healthcare, finance, and banking, are very highly regulated, and very often it is required to have multiple certifications of all kinds. So what I always try to encourage companies to focus on, even if they want to focus on healthcare and finance, focus on a small niche within these larger segments. But let me tell you a few examples from manufacturing or industrial automation. There are also many opportunities and many small market niches there. For instance, precision component manufacturing, injection molding, or building custom equipment. So while there are a lot of opportunities in many sectors, I would encourage you to focus on small niche market segments. And here we are with the first questions, and now you can post your questions and we try to answer those.
Yes, thank you, Laszlo. I see we already have some questions coming in, so we have some time to answer them right now, as well as at the end. So please make sure, if you have any more questions, feel free to add them to the question box. So the very first question that I would like to answer is actually someone who asked about whether we not consider North Africa as nearshoring, but I think that is very much what we consider nearshoring. I think Hans can also explain a bit more, because he's also active in Egypt. regarding what his decision might have been to actually do business there?
Yeah, North Africa can definitely be nearshoring. It's basically, it's not a scientific definition on nearshoring, but in my opinion, it's a matter of time zones and travel time. And I would normally say within 2 or 3 time zones and within 5 hours flight, it would be a nearshore location. When it comes to North Africa, then most countries will be in that scope.
Yeah. Okay, and someone is also asking, which is, I believe, a question regarding your presentation. They ask, you mentioned Scandinavia as an early adapter of AI and is investing heavily in this area. But however, that actually makes the bar quite high for new entrants. How would you go about for an SME from a low and middle income country? How can they still be able to enter this market?
I'll be honest and say, well, it is difficult. It's not an easy job. That doesn't mean that you're not able to do it. You have the brains and the knowledge and everything to do that. My approach, if I were you, I would basically go through contacts and try and get a personal introduction, because sending out emails in thousands is not gonna get you there. But rather look at contacts, see if you have any countrymen, women in a European country. Maybe they're not working within IT, but they also have a network. So utilizing that network and try and go that way. Europe is very much about contacts and knowing people, and if you come with some sort of a recommendation from somebody, that's a whole lot easier. So use your network as a primary way in my mind, and then try and be on the ground as well.
Yeah.
Go for a trip or so.
And someone is also asking, I think this is maybe a question you can answer as well, is whether Scandinavian countries prefer, I think they probably mean native English speakers, or not necessarily.
Sorry, once again?
So the question is whether the Scandinavian countries prefer only to work with English-speaking countries, or not just necessarily.
In my mind, English is an absolute must for Europe. If you go back a few years, then I would say German for Germany, but there's also a huge change there at the moment, and quite a lot of companies in Germany have acknowledged that if they are to use offshore, nearshore, it has to be in English. And the proficiency in English in Germany is also increasing significantly, especially within IT. So English is an absolute must, unless it's France, of course, then French would be a good choice. But the general thoughts are English, yes.
Yeah. And maybe one more question for Laszlo. So we have a question from someone who's asking how AI should address the standards and the norms requirements for African products regarding the European markets. How do you see that there is maybe requirements coming from the African market and also the European markets?
Well, I think what is really important for companies, also from Africa, that they gain experience with AI, and in the coming block of presentation I will talk about it, that it would be very, very important to master a number of technologies that are related to AI. So I don't think there is a specific requirement for Africa, but in general I think European buyers would expect that, you know, African service providers are as proficient in AI as any other providers from any other parts of the world. and competition is getting stronger and stronger. So African providers will have to provide, let's say, other providers eventually from other countries that are better known in Europe as an IT outsourcing destination. I am thinking about even India or China or the Philippines for that, not to mention the Central and Eastern European countries. So I think for African companies, it would be very important to also look at what the competition is doing near shore and offshore, because they will have to adapt to that.
Thank you. All right, one more question and then we move to the rest of the presentation, but we will get to the remaining questions at the end as well. So one more question for you, Hans, because you talked about having a local presence in Europe is quite important. Can you maybe share what your thoughts are on the Estonian e-residency?
Yeah, I think it's important that it's not a matter of trying to get a company number. It's a matter of trying to actually be there. So if the worst thing you can do is basically spend a whole lot of money on getting some sort of a company number somewhere, getting a lot of cost on doing accounting and yearly reports and so forth, and then not being there, because then that will be figured out within 5 minutes, and then it goes from being a advantage to being a disadvantage, because then it's not clear, and that has to do with the honesty and so forth. Could I just also quick comment to countries and so forth? I think one thing which is extremely important is that you have to accept, and I also have to accept that with Egypt, that there's a perception and there's a reality of a country. You have to deal with the perception of the European buyers on your country. They will have a perception that might be very, very wrong, but you have to deal with it, because you cannot just conclude that they know the same about your country than you do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Hans. I now want to give the floor back to Laszlo for the remaining part of this presentation, and then at the end we will turn back to all the questions that come in. But thank you so much for all your enthusiasm with these questions. Laszlo, back to you.
Thank you. Maybe just one addition to this perception, what Hans mentioned, that every single company that want to enter the European market with IT services, software development services, AI type of software development services must ask and be able to answer a question, and that is why me and why not my competitors? And that is not necessarily only about the company, but also the location. So and companies have to give a viable answer to this question: why my location, my country, my company, and not another company, another location in Central and Eastern Europe, or in another offshore or nearshore location? I think it's very important that companies are prepared for this question. And in my practice, I experienced that to answer this is not always that easy. But again, now let's continue with the presentation, and let's try to talk a little bit about how to enter the European market with AI software development services. And here in this block, we are going to talk about your company. If your company is ready, the entry channels, how can you use AI for market entry, and the risks that you are facing. So let's start with your company. As we all know, and we have been saying that for a very, very long time, IT outsourcing is a trust-based business. So you need to put some kind of trust-building infrastructure in place by knowing that your potential clients are looking for people, skills, processes, expertise, and technology. and not least, they would like to have some kind of cost advantage and efficiency gain along the road. So one important thing is that in Europe, cost advantage or a lower price is not alone is not going to win new clients, but clients or potential clients are going to evaluate your complete offer. Now, when we are looking at AI, those companies in developing countries, I rather use the term emerging markets, that are aligning with GDPR and the AI Act, will gain trust when they come out with an AI software development offer, will gain trust with the European clients. And if those companies are also emphasizing data security, the ethics around AI, and the transparency in their software development practices and how they operate their company, this is all going to help to gain trust with their potential clients. Now, let me tell you a few things about standards and best practices. We had seen that in the European Union, there are EU-level legal structures. There are also country-level legal structures and best practices and standards. And now we can also talk about IT industry best practices, that is such as agile processes that are now very widely required, or the existence of quality management system, security management, and AI risk management. And interestingly, there are ISO standards for AI risk management. So beside IT industry type of best practices, we can also talk about AI-specific, general AI-specific standards and best practices. And among others, ISO has a framework for instance, machine learning, but others for face recognition and language learning also exist. And to make things a little bit more complicated, also industry level best practices and standards exist. So here I just listed the automotive industry, where there are different standards, safety standards, and delivery standards and coding standards that are now all modified according to AI requirements. So when you enter the market, you will have to look at all these standards and best practices in order to gain trust with your potential clients. And here comes the second poll, which again I'm not going to see, about the future, how you see the future of AI in your company. All right, so from another channel, I can see the results of the poll. So it is about a question: how what part of AI or what AI technology would have would add most value to your team in the next 12 months? And 14% of you were saying AI-assisted coding tools. Again, 14% automated testing. Interestingly, 33% project planning and 39% building AI-powered features, products for clients. Now, very good. So I can see that many of you would like to use AI one way or the other one within your company in order to serve your clients better. What we didn't talk about yet, and that is the technology and what type of skills you need when you want to offer AI development services to your clients or to your potential clients in Europe. And I'm sure that you are very good at your core stack of technologies, kind of standard technologies from Java to all kinds of databases, cybersecurity, front and back end integration, and so forth and so forth. These are kind of standard technologies used in software development. Addition to this, you need to master AI and data science capabilities, from machine learning to AI integration. And I just listed here a number of those areas along with the tools that you can also use. But the bottom line is that beside a strong technical core, a technical stack of development tools and technologies, you also need to add AI and data science capabilities that you might not have at this very moment in-house. I'm not going to talk too much about this slide. I just wanted to highlight the fact that if you want to get into building AI solutions, you have to choose from a large number of different tools, frameworks, and technologies. And if you ask me, what would be the core set of these technologies and frameworks and tools, I wouldn't have an answer to that, because in order to be able to say something about that, I would need to know your company, your potential clients, your specialization, and so forth and so forth. So before you get into the market and you decide who your ideal clients are, where they are, you will have to, I think, make a detailed analysis of the different tools and technologies and frameworks that those clients might require from you. Again, this is just to demonstrate that building AI solutions might require on your side to learn a large number of tools, technologies, and frameworks. But AI can help your software development process. You can code faster, so you can gain efficiency. You can test better. So you can use AI to generate test cases, for instance. You can discover bugs early, and we know that the earlier you discover the bugs in your system, the cheaper they are to be eliminated. AI can help you with documentation. AI can also help with project management, and I think in the poll, project management requirement was pretty high on the list, and AI can also automate to a certain extent your let's say development operations by using AI platforms to disseminate and install AI and develop, and not only to develop but also to support AI systems. So AI can help your software development practices. The technical side. Now let's talk about the market entry channels, and this is not only true for AI or applicable to AI, but also to any kind of market entry activities regarding IT outsourcing. So very often I hear from companies that I would like to find clients in Europe, and I always discover that the first step into finding clients is not finding clients, but to find and develop a large number of high quality contacts. That's why I always say that the first step into getting into the market, to the European market with IT software development services, is to find a large number of high quality clients. So you might be able to answer a very simple question. In your company, do you have a process that you develop European contacts on a daily basis? And what is your performance indicator for that? And my experience is that for many small and medium-sized companies in emerging markets do not have these activities on a daily basis, but mostly on a point-in-time basis. When there is an event or other type of activity, then developing contacts is getting more intense, but otherwise there is no such activity per se built into the market entry process. So I would encourage you to have some kind of a process in your company where you develop high quality contacts, high quality European contacts on a daily basis. And of course, this activity is not simple, but specialization and niche market focus can make it much easier. Now, when you want to enter the European market, and this is a longer story, and you can read more about it in the market study published by CBI on the AI market. But your most viable market entry channel, how you get into the market and how you can build up a sustainable European business line, is to find a strategic partner. Now, what are those strategic partners? Very simple. Those are similar IT companies as your own company. Sometimes they call themselves independent software vendors, outsourcing management agencies, outsourcing service providers, and so forth and so forth. But if you look at this trade channel chart, you will realize that there are only two actors in it that will potentially and actually will pay for your services, and those are the strategic partners and the final users. Now, to target the final users is quite difficult because many European companies do not have the internal resources and capabilities for software development or to manage software development processes, let alone to work together with an offshore service provider. A strategic partner, an IT company, a software development company in Western Europe, they have their own client base already. There are a number of advantages of working with these strategic partners, but also, of course, there are a number of disadvantages to work with the strategic partner. One of these disadvantages might be that you cannot promote your company on a certain geography, for instance. But there are others. Again, you can read more in detail about the trade channels, the IT outsourcing trade channels in the CBI market studies. Again, your most viable market entry channel is to find a strategic partner in Europe. So how does your ideal client look like? At least that is my opinion, that you might want to look for a software development company with 15 to 150 employees somewhere in Western and Northern Europe, in manufacturing, industrial automation, retail, e-commerce, logistics, and supply chain. I think those are the most viable industries, and preferably also niche markets within these larger segments. Otherwise, your partner should be open to remote collaboration, and they should be able to handle that. And as Hans already said, fluent English, I think, is a basic requirement. On some markets, it's more important than other. But again, you need to speak, let's say, good enough English to be able to cooperate with your partners. One important thing that I've added to this chart from my experience is that you should be very careful with large corporations, companies, again, IT companies that are working in the healthcare, the legal, the public sector, and the banking sector. Usually, entering these sectors is quite complicated, quite difficult for small companies. And when a small company tries to work together with the larger corporations, then I think very often the end is a kind of disappointment on both sides. AI is one of the technologies that can also help your market entry. So you can use AI not only to develop or to help to develop your software or to make your software development process more efficient, but AI is a set of technologies and tools that can also help your market entry, particularly with market intelligence. So you can use AI tools for market research and predictive analytics of the market. Lead generation might be possible, even though my experience is that it's just up and coming. We talked about the cost efficiency and the efficiency gain related to software development, but I think AI can help a lot in online marketing, particularly in content generation and search engine optimization. So this is the one, and I would say never say ever or never, but one of the technologies that is not only helping your technical process, but it can also help your market entry process at the same time. There are many risks associated with AI. we know about that, and it's very well documented already. But here I would like to list just a few risk elements that you are facing as a small IT service provider from an emerging destination. One that that almost everybody talks about is potential job displacement or job loss from automation, code generation, testing, user interface design, and so forth and so forth. Global competition is increasing. For some, the idea is that AI on the longer term can replace offshore developers, which in my view is not going to happen on the short term. But efficiency and quality might increase, so you will have a tougher competition in that direction, and there might be a skill gap. Now, in my practice, I usually work with small IT software development companies that have also local clients. So they are not entirely specialized on offshore or nearshore outsourcing, but they are also serving their local clients. And many of these companies that want to enter the European market, the main activity is developing their own product and offering services to local clients. Now, very often these clients have different requirements, in this case regarding AI, than the companies within Europe. So there might be a skill gap that you, one way or the other one, will have to close. And another thing is that very often, and I think it's not only in emerging markets but all over the world, education is quite slow to adapt to fast changing technologies. So your universities or IT education might not be able to develop the necessary skills in order to serve your clients in Europe. So how can you mitigate this risk? Again and again, specialize and focus on a niche market. And very important, try to establish a small AI research and development unit within the company. Don't think about big things, maybe 1 or 2 people that are basically discovering the capabilities of the technologies. Pay attention to your people, train them on AI technologies. Try to form partnerships with universities, accelerators, innovation hubs, technology associations, and so forth and so forth. And diversify your income stream. So mix your client projects with product development and offer AI related services locally in order to gain experiences. So those are the activities that you can do in order to mitigate the risks. And finally, I would like to summarize what we talked about. We talked about the market demand, which are the industries in Europe adopting AI rapidly, what specific AI solutions are in demand, what size of companies to look for, who are the competitors, what are the legal, the cultural requirements, and the trust factors and the trust you need to build. That's about market knowledge. And when we talk about your company, you need a credible portfolio of technologies, a reliable process, proper quality assurance, and you need to have a kind of trust building infrastructure in place. And again, I can't tell you enough, try to specialize and try to focus on a niche market. So with that, I thank you very much, and we can move to questions, if you will.
Thank you, Laszlo. We are almost at the end of this webinar, but we have still a lot of questions. So let's do our best to answer as much questions as we can. So Hans, there was actually a question to you, which is someone who asked if you can share your experiences about some of the challenges, but also the effectiveness of working with a team in Egypt.
Yeah, maybe I should also say I've been working with Danish developers, I've been working with Ukrainian developers, I've been working with Pakistani developers before, and for the last 16 years I've been working with Egyptian ones. Of course, Egypt is a different country than Denmark. That gives some challenges, but also some pleasant surprises. The educational level, the willingness to work, the skill sets and so forth is absolutely in place in Egypt, and I see it as a market of really good developers and with a good approach and attitude towards working, and also fitting the cultural readiness side of working with Europe in a very, very good way.
Perfect. I see we have quite a couple of questions for people who are wondering if one of you, maybe Laszlo, we have already briefly touched upon it a little bit about how to find European clients. But do you have any maybe recommendations for what kind of online platforms, how buyers and sellers can meet each other? One thing which you say would stand out.
Right. Again, I think the most important thing is to find regularly very high quality contacts, because from contacts you will have the clients. So I think it's very important to put that in your mind. That the first thing is that you need to have high quality contacts in fairly large numbers. And one of the interesting thing is that nowadays there are a lot of online events possible to attend, where there are always or very often kind of opportunities to attend different virtual meetings, and there you can develop, for instance, a lot of meetings online without leaving your office. The second thing is, and again, specialize, because if you specialize, there are a lot of specialized events all over Europe. You know, the time of large IT, general IT events is over. So no more Sabbath type of events, but there are a lot of very specialized events all over Europe, smaller ones, bigger ones, to go there and try to talk to people. And of course, you can use different online platforms. One thing you should not do not spam people with your offers. Okay, try to follow a kind of soft approach, and again, first try to just talk to people, and you don't have to push too hard. It will take time, but if you develop contacts and if you develop your professional network, sooner or later those contacts will yield contracts. I think that's the most important thing, that you focus on contacts and not clients on first place.
Perfect, excellent. Thank you so much for elaborating. We're almost at the end of this webinar, so I will just go for one more question, and then the remaining questions we will answer afterwards. So there is a question from someone who is sourcing Tunisian skills for European companies, And maybe Hans, because you are really active in the sector of outsourcing, do you think that European companies would prefer to go through a company like this, like an intermediary? Or do you think they are more likely to go and look for those skills by themselves?
It depends a little bit on the company, but I would say on an overall level, the professional European companies will go through a company, especially if they want to source less than maybe, let's say, 50 resources. Otherwise, they might do it on their own. If you go through a company, you are cleared with all the legislation and the legal side. If you are sourcing basically a freelance, then you have the responsibility as a European company to vouch for all the things around security, checking up on their workstation and their work environment, making sure that they're being taught about GDPR and data protection and so forth. If you go through a company, and that of course demands that the company actually perform those services and make sure that their employees are aware of GDPR and data protection and maintain that knowledge each year and test it, that would be preferable for most companies with what I would call a certain professional level. So there's a lot of sense in going through a company when you're a European customer, definitely, no doubt about that. But you also have to provide and comply with those things which are then on the company's responsibility.
Okay, thank you so much, Hans. And with that, I would like to conclude this session. We still have many more questions, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. So we will answer these questions in written form and share them to you via email. For now, I want to thank you all so much for joining. I want to thank our speakers, Hans, Laszlo. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Please also make sure to check out our latest market research on AI software development services for SMEs that want to export through Europe, which include really more detailed information on some of the topics we have touched upon. And yes, I think it's very clear AI is really a technology that is here to stay. So we hope this has really given you a start to further explore this journey. And we look forward to be in contact with you in the near future. And with that being said, thank you all and have a great day.